Tutorials where we're going to be adding on some enhancements to the VR adventure game, which is found in the gallery in CoSpaces. We're going to be doing in this tutorial some work with CoSpace properties, collision detectors. Basically what we're going to try to do here is create a heads-up display that will follow the camera around, and that will show the score to the player. We'll also be putting in objects that as you collect them will generate score, and those objects will disappear as they're collected. So let's go ahead and first go into this drawer here, and what I want to do is select pretty much every item in the hierarchy. Idea here is that I want to get rid of most of these just because there's a lot of items. Let's hide them. So we can do that by grouping them together. All right. And then also another thing I want to do is I want to make it so that way I won't accidentally move them out of place. So I can come here and just lock them all. Okay. They'll still function properly. Whatever code they have on them will still run, but I can't accidentally undo them. All right. Now the other thing is we want to check on our camera itself. All right. We want to make sure that it is enabled here in CoBlocks, and that the camera is set to walk, which is the default. All right, so let's work on the heads-up display first. Now this heads-up display is going to be attached to the camera so that you will see it from the first-person view. So we go into Library under Building right here. We want to grab one of these clear displays and just set it in there. And kind of look at it where it is from the side there. All right, it's a little bit in front of the camera. Let's move it up a bit. All right, just press play. Okay, it's a little too low. Let's get it up a bit higher. If you can't click on the object easily, easiest thing to do is, again, come into the hierarchy, click on it there. Much easier to work with. All right. So again, let's see where that looks. All right, we kind of want it up here in the top right, so we need to move it out a bit. And up a little bit more. Okay, that's looking a lot better. Now we may have some issues where it will end up being behind some objects in our scene. If that's so, we can bring it a little bit closer to the camera, but we can test that out later. Okay, so now it's saying new text right now. So what we want to do here is come into the scripts, and we'll add in a new CoBlocks script. And let's just call this score for right now. Now in this we want to create the heads-up display on there. Okay. So the first thing we want is when the stage is initially set, we want it to show the word score. Right. So we're going to need to have the text set for that. Right. Let's expand this out so you can see it better. All right. Now currently we don't have it accessible to us, so we need to go back to that just heads-up display again and make sure it's available to us in code. All right. And so now we can select it. All right. And it would probably be better to rename that. We'll do that in a second. Now, what information do we actually want to put in there? Under the Data tab, we have the ability to create or concatenate strings. So let's drop that block in there. And the first part of that will be score. And we'll leave a space there so that way the actual score, when we put it in there, will work, all right? And now we can run that just to test it to see, and there it is. It is actually displaying that score. Okay. Now we want to create a variable that will store the score as we play the game. So under data, we have two options for us there. We have local variables here, which are in the traditional variable format, and then we also have CoSpace properties. All right, now these are properties on the CoSpace object, and so we'll set the initial value of that. Now we have to create a name for it. All right. Now notice it is a string rather than just being a name like it would be with a variable over here. And then the actual value, we'll set it to an initial value of 0. So we'll drag in that number block in there. Okay. So now that we have a CoSpace property set, we'll go ahead and bring that CoSpace property block into here and type in score. Now the reason we're using CoSpace properties here is that variables in CoSpaces are local, and they're local only to one script. So the parrot script and the platform scripts don't have access to a variable that if I were to create a variable like this, they would not have access to this myVar variable. Okay, whereas CoSpace properties can be accessed across not only different scripts but also other scenes. All right, so if the player gets to the end of this scene at the top of the pyramid and goes on to the next scene, that score can then carry over onto that second scene. So that's what we want here. All right, so now if we play test this again, we have a score of 0 showing up. Okay, so next up we want to put in some objects that our player can then run into. So let's go back to our library and see what we have. And I'm leaning towards a roast chicken that I saw in here. Very nice. Okay, so we'll put that roast chicken in our scene. Put it up in view. Oh, that's way too far in. Let's move it over. Okay, so now it's now in a place where our player would likely run into it, sort of. Yeah, it's better. Okay. Now we've got our roast chicken. Okay, and we can see that under the hierarchy as well. We need to make sure, again, we allow it to be edited in code. Okay. Now I'm going to call this roast turkey 1. Okay, so that way every duplicate we make of this, right? And then if we move that roast turkey over here somewhere, notice it comes up as roast turkey 2. So that way they're coming up in nice numbered order. So later if we want to iterate through them, it's easier to do so. Okay, so that's all I'll put in there for now. You could put in a lot more turkeys, but that will give us the basic idea of score. Let's do confirm that that second turkey does have its code enabled, and it does. Since we duplicated the first one, which was already enabled, the second one is automatically enabled as well. Okay, so let's go back into code. So we need some events here. Now, in this case, we don't want click events, we want collision events. All right, so we can put in here our roast turkey 1 colliding with the camera, which is what we have there. All right, and we'll do the same thing. We'll actually copy it later. Let's go ahead and build out the code for this first. Okay, so what do we want to happen when the turkey, or when the camera collides with the turkey? All right, we want the score to go up by a certain amount, right? And we want the turkey to disappear. So let's start with the score. So we need to first change that CoSpace property. Okay, so we can say set CoSpace property score. All right, and then here we can change it by a certain value, but we want to get the existing score and then add on to it. So let's get that operator block. All right. And then for the values we put in there, CoSpace property, getting it in the right slot is always challenging. That's okay, you can always drag it back. There we go. And then we can, what score we put on there is really arbitrary. We could give it a score of 5 if we want to, 5 million, doesn't matter. All right. So that will change the actual score, but note if we were to actually play it now, right, and we go and run into the turkey, right, our score heads up disappeared actually. Interesting. So it did not have the desired effect. Let's play it again. Yeah, our score is there to start with. Okay. We need to still set the text there. Okay. Okay, so we're going to set the text there again, and we want to again, let's just copy that and paste it there. Okay, so now this should have the intended effect. Let's see if it actually works. Oh, I see, it's going off screen. We left out one very important step. Our score is not attached to our camera, and it did not actually update properly. So let's go fix that score being attached to the camera problem. Okay, so we have this up here. We want to attach it. Now when we do that, there's a million little blue balls here. So the easiest way, again, to attach is to go to the hierarchy, and then we're going to put it onto the camera. And now notice how it becomes a child of the camera. Okay. And while we're at it, let's just go ahead and rename this thing. Heads up. Display. Right. Okay. So now that it's attached, it hopefully will not go out of frame. And sure enough, it stays in frame. Now our score is not going up properly. So let's look at our code and see what's going on there. All right, we are, we did not change that to score. It was just saying the general key, right? There we go. So it went up, and every time I hit the turkey, and it goes up by 5. Now we don't want that happening, so we need to get rid of the turkey, all right? So in order to do that, we need to go into, I believe it's under items. Thought I saw it there. Let's go delete. There we go, delete. So we want to delete this item before we update the score. If we put the delete item after we update the score, potentially we could accidentally touch the object multiple times before we actually delete it. Okay, and we want to delete, in this case, roast turkey 1, because that is the item that we have the collision detector on. Okay, so this time around, it should, and the score goes up, and our turkey has gone away. Wonderful. Okay, now let's go back to this set CoSpaces property again. One thing I want to point out here is that we have key value pairs. I forgot to mention this before, that the key is essentially the name of the variable, right? And the value, obviously, is the value of the variable, okay? Now, you can have multiple properties on any object. So, I mean, the objects have both methods, which are functions, and properties, which are essentially variables that store data, okay? So, let's go ahead and duplicate this collision detector, and we'll change it to roast turkey 2. All right. Now, you can imagine with lots and lots of these items in your scene, just duplicating this for every single one is probably not the best way to do it. Potentially, you could create a list of items and then generate these collision detectors through code, but that's for a later tutorial. Let's go ahead and run our code and see that our second turkey does work. All right, first turkey's out of the way. Second turkey. I need to play more Minecraft and practice here. All right, second turkey is now gone.